Welcome back to The Foundry by Forge College. I'm your host, and today we're tackling a brand new explainer, collecting and structuring evidence for execution integrations. Now, if you've been following along in our advanced Solana concepts track, specifically ever felt like you're staring at a completely unhinged, chaotic pile of logs, traces, and metrics, and you have absolutely no idea how to turn them into a defensible technical claim? Well, take a deep breath. You're in exactly the right place. Today, we're going to take all that chaos and turn it into a structured, absolutely indisputable technical reality. So let's just dive right in. Think back to our previous lesson on scoping execution integrations for analysis. In that explainer, we mapped out our exact requirements. It's kind of like surveying an empty lot. I mean, it's perfectly surveyed, right? We know exactly where the property lines are, but right now, it's just dirt. To actually build our analysis, we need to fill that empty lot with a structured inventory of real hard data. Those are our building materials. So we're moving from just knowing what we need to actually gathering the concrete evidence to prove it. Here's our master blueprint for today's explainer. We'll be moving from planning to building, establishing the blueprint mental model, looking at the 4 evidence types, tagging our materials, running through a real-world case study, and finally, validating your construction. All right, part 1, from planning to building. Let's grab our hard hats and step right into the construction zone. The absolute most crucial point here is that we have to convert our targeted questions into a deterministic, repeatable checklist of artifacts. Look, you just can't show up to a stakeholder meeting, dump a massive pile of tangled, unmarked wires on the table and say, hey, trust me, I looked at the logs, it's all fine. I mean, we've all been there, right? But that kind of ad hoc guesswork just leads to these endless, painful review cycles. We need a repeatable template so that every single claim we make traces directly back to verifiable source data. Moving on to part 2, the blueprint mental model. This is what's going to anchor our entire workflow. Think about how we're framing our task here. You wouldn't build a house with mystery materials, right? You definitely wouldn't install drywall that just magically appeared in the back of some guy's pickup truck without a receipt. And in that exact same way, you really shouldn't build an analysis without perfectly matching your artifacts to your claims. The mental model is simple. Treat every single section of your final report like a room in a building. To officially sign off on that room, you need the architectural drawings, the material invoices, and the inspection photos. This model forces total, ruthless honesty about whether you actually have the data to back up what you're saying. Okay, part 3, the 4 evidence types. Let's get to know our building materials a little better. What you're looking at here is your standardized material manifest. It categorizes exactly what data you need to collect, where it originates, the key identifiers, and the absolute minimum metadata required to lock it down. By breaking your evidence into these 4 repeatable types, transactions, programs, traces, and environments, your templates stay compact and actually useful, which means you are officially no longer hoarding random text files in a folder mysteriously named New Folder 3 on your desktop. You're curating specific, categorized artifacts. Let's break these 4 types down. First up on the list, we have your transaction artifacts. We're talking about things like metadata and the raw JSON you pull from an RPC's getTransaction method. Think of these as the vital wiring diagram of your integration. They show exactly how the execution is supposed to flow from point A to point B, capturing the essential electrical current of your data. This includes your exact signatures, block hashes, and the precise state changes that happen during the lifecycle of that transaction. Meanwhile, your program-level artifacts, so things like on-chain snapshots, program binaries, source repo commits, these serve as your unchangeable floor plan. They literally dictate where everything goes. Think about a state snapshot. It tells you exactly what the room looked like before and after a transaction ran through it. It's the physical, undeniable reality of the blockchain at that exact slot. Honestly, you just can't argue with a snapshot. It is the ultimate source of truth for the state of the chain. And finally, we have runtime traces and environment data. These act as your on-site inspection photos. We're talking transaction log messages, cross-program invocation or CPI stacks, and validator performance metrics. They prove exactly what happened during execution. Now listen to this. If an RPC node aggressively trims your logs, you might lose vital CPI frames. It's literally like having someone steal your camera right out of your hands right as you're taking the inspection photos. And that is exactly why securing these pristine photos early and backing them up is absolutely non-negotiable. Which brings us to part 4, tagging your materials. Because let's face it, an artifact without context, that's just expensive garbage. You absolutely 100% must attach tamper-evident tags to your materials. We're talking canonical identifiers and file hashes here to make sure nobody swapped your premium data for cheap, ambiguous logs. Think about it. If you hand an auditor a trace file, but you can't actually tell them which validator node it came from or the exact slot it represents, it's completely useless. You have to record the provenance. Who collected it, when, from what exact RPC endpoint. Doing this for every single artifact is quite literally the only way to guarantee total reproducibility for your analysis. All right, part 5, real-world case study. Let's pour some concrete and actually apply this framework. Okay, picture this. A stakeholder drops this beautifully complex question on your desk at, say, 4:30 p.m. on a Friday afternoon. Do cross-program invocations to program X fail when parallelism exceeds N, and if so, why? Oh boy. This is a classic thorny execution integration issue. And to solve it, you can't just stare blankly at a block explorer and pray for a sudden epiphany, right? You need a highly structured, rigorous approach. So to answer that stakeholder and actually save your weekend, you're going to follow this reproducible assembly manual. Step 1, you map the claim to figure out what data you actually need. Step 2, you collect the artifacts and their provenance metadata, making sure to store them in a version-controlled folder so your fellow analysts don't lose their minds trying to find them later. Step 3, run your triage checklist. Step 4, classify the artifact based on its completeness. And finally, Step 5, you write a very brief, factual interpretation of what that specific artifact tells you. Notice how we keep that interpretation super short? We're reserving the grand narrative synthesis for the actual report later. For now, we're just sticking to the cold, hard facts. And that brings us to part 6, validating your construction. It's time for the ultimate site inspection. You're going to run this really compact, deliberate triage checklist on every single artifact you collected to quickly classify it. Does it have a canonical ID? Yep. Is the provenance explicitly recorded? Okay. Is the file hash stored securely so we can detect silent modifications? Good. Did it actually answer the intended question? You do this rapid fire. It lets you know exactly what materials you have on hand, separating the pristine data from the bad before you even write a single word of your actual analysis. Now listen up, because here is the absolute golden rule of this entire process. Do not, under any circumstances, attempt to build your final recommendations without a complete set of supporting artifacts. Period. End of story. If your wiring diagram is missing or your inspection photo is blurry, you mark that room incomplete. Trying to force a brilliant conclusion using partial, shaky data, that is just a surefire way to have your hard-earned claims totally torn apart during peer review. So, as a practical takeaway for your own workflow, I want you to try to prepare at least 3 of these fully populated and validated evidence templates before you move on to building actual analysis artifacts. Honestly, by doing this hard, unglamorous work of evidence gathering right now, you completely free yourself up to focus entirely on the high-level interpretation later. Way better than frantically wrangling missing data at the 11th hour, right? I'm going to leave you with this final provocative thought. If your analysis was audited tomorrow, could your evidence rebuild your claims entirely from scratch? Well, if you follow the blueprint model we just outlined today, the answer will be a confident, resounding yes. That wraps it up for us. Don't forget to visit forge.college to dive deeper into this module and other fascinating Web3 topics. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and as always, happy building.